Hi everyone, welcome to Off the Podium. I have a guest from Atlanta, Paul Scanling, conductor of Atlanta Concert Band, and also the founder and conductor of a new orchestra, right, Paul? The Marietta Symphony Orchestra, fairly new orchestra. Welcome to Off the Podium.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Yes, Marietta Symphony, brand new. We've had one concert, so can't get much newer than that.
So, what was the idea behind starting this group?
Well, there were probably 100 reasons that I really decided to do that. Primarily was a frustration at my inability to kind of get my foot in the door and doing things more than what I've been doing. I conduct a lot. I do a lot of different things. I work with a chamber group at Oglethorpe University. I direct a community band. I work with a group here in town called Chamber Cartel. We do lots of contemporary chamber music. But I wanted to get that professional orchestra experience as well. And I don't really have the resume or the background or the connections as well to get my foot in the door for those things. So
Yeah.
I was about a year and a half ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a lawyer, and he said when he graduated from law school, he got hired by a law firm and looked around and realized he was never going to have his name on the door. He was never going to have a say in how that firm was run, and if he wanted those things, he had to go out and start his own law firm. And that kind of set off a little bell in my head that, yeah, I think I'm going to have to do the same thing if that's what I really want. Fortunately, having a lawyer friend helps tremendously when you're trying to incorporate and recruit a board and go through the 501c3 application process and all that stuff. So I spent a little over a year getting all that stuff set up, doing some fundraising, learning a lot. I've read a lot of books. I go to the library and read about all sorts of, how to incorporate and how to fundraise and the legal process for getting all that stuff done. It's been very eye-opening. It's a one-man operation right now. I'm the CEO, the chief everything officer. So, I drove the truck. I drove the truck to move music stands and chairs to the theater for the concert. I'm doing it all right now. So it's been great. I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to take off. The community's been very supportive of it. It's in here in suburban Atlanta, Marietta, Georgia. It's a town really of about 60,000 people, but Cobb County, the county it's in, is the county seat. And Cobb County is about 750,000 people. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of business here. But there's not a lot of performing arts that market themselves as local.
Uh-huh.
There are a lot of groups here that label themselves Georgia something.
I see.
And the people in Cobb County and the people specifically in Marietta want to be able to brag about their own city.
Uh-huh.
And so being able to say we're from Marietta has been very, very important to get my foot in the door with all sorts of people, because they said, oh, well, I'm from Marietta, and this is about Marietta rather than it's for Georgia and it happens to be in the area. That's really helped.
Yeah, it's great. So what's the area looking like? I mean, what's the closest orchestra or performing ensemble in the area? How far is it?
Well, there are two other orchestras that call Marietta home. One is called the Georgia Symphony Orchestra.
Uh-huh.
They used to be the Cobb Symphony Orchestra. They've been around about 60 years, and it's a semi-pro group. They pay about 20 people. The rest are community volunteers. And then we have a church here, First Baptist Church in Marietta, which has a pretty decent-sized church orchestra, but it is 100% voluntary. It is a community group, and they play fine. They play mostly pops concerts outside of the church, plus their church responsibilities. However often they play in worship, I don't really know. But good groups full of lots of good people, but there's not really a professional group here in Marietta. There are several other groups here in the metro area very similar to what I'm doing. The Cab Symphony Orchestra, Johns Creek, which is a little suburb in north of downtown. And of course, there's the Atlanta Symphony. We have several different universities, all with some orchestras, some of which are very fine orchestras. Georgia Tech has an outstanding orchestra. Very, very talented group of students down there. So there's really is a lot of music, but there's not a whole lot of groups here in Cobb County that are trying to do it at a really high professional level. And I think that was another hook. I think everybody likes those other orchestras, but they understand that they're community members that just want to play for a living or just want to play for fun. We are full of people that want to play for a living.
Yeah. How you said something about something that I always think about. Why is it so hard to get conducting opportunities in the States. I don't know how much you want to get into this, but I'd like to hear your perspective on it. Having so many years of experience and having tried maybe applied to thousands of places. Why is it so hard?
That's an excellent question, one that has kept me up at night.
Yeah.
I've applied for every entry-level orchestra job over the last 15 years or so, most of which I was either too old because they said I was too old, or I was too old even though that was kind of an unwritten rule. Most of the bigger orchestras, the ones that would have an assistant position, treat that position as a position for a very young, almost like an internship. Mm-hmm. You're going to do it for 2 or 3 years. They're not going to pay you much, but they're going to work you pretty hard, and you'll learn a lot, and it'll be a great experience for you. But they treat that as, if you're over age 30, you're too old in their opinion. Yeah. And I don't think that's correct at all, because I see what the assistants do here in Atlanta. They conduct the pops concerts, they conduct the children's concerts and children and families concert, and I look at what they're doing, and I think, I do very, very similar things with my community band, and I look at what they're doing and say, that person still has a lot to learn about turning around and talking to an audience, and mm-hmm. how they present themselves to a group of elementary students versus how they present themselves to the families that might come here and play Star Wars or whatever. Yeah. That experience level, that you're not going to get that very much before the age of 30. Yeah. That experience level and that training, I think, would be great for the orchestra, because most orchestras, I think Atlanta is a good example, they play a lot more performances for children's and families and pops concerts and all the educational programs than they do any other type of program. Yeah. They'll do their classical series, they'll do it a couple times a week over the course of about 40 weeks, so they're getting 80 concerts in, but that educational concert, they may play that 100 times in a year. Yeah. So I think it's important that the orchestra is presenting their best foot forward to those younger audiences, because hopefully sometime down the road, those younger audiences are the older audiences. Yeah. That's a great perspective to have. And another thing that is frustrating at times is the fact that, some of these music directors, they get paid a lot of money, but they don't often like to conduct those children's concerts, those family concerts, and that's a little bit frustrating, because I feel like as a music director of a major orchestra, getting paid $500,000-$600,000 a year or maybe more, you should conduct those concerts. Those are very important concerts and very inspirational to young kids who might be in attendance, or even young adults, or even older people who are in the audiences. So that's another thing that I find frustrating with professional orchestras. I don't know how you feel about that, but I just wish the music directors did a little bit more than just the Masterwork series or whatever they call them. Yeah, you see the big name orchestra conductors, and they will conduct 8 or 10 weekends a year at their main job, for instance here in Atlanta, and then they're out guest conducting in other places. And it's one of the things I'm really trying to accomplish with the Marietta Symphony Orchestra is to make it of, by, and for the community of Marietta. Yeah. And so, okay, it's great if somebody someplace else wants me to come guest conduct the orchestra, but that doesn't really help Marietta in a way. It takes my focus away from what I need to be doing in Marietta. Yeah. The situation's a little different because I'm doing everything. I'm the executive director, I'm the president of the board, and all that stuff. But I think if, as a music director, your focus, almost all of your musical focus should be on that job there. Yeah. And not necessarily conducting every single week, because that's a big grind. I've done 5 concerts in the last 4 weeks, so I understand a little bit about that grind here over recently. But making sure that your focus is there and you're a part of the community, rather than just, we're bringing in this big name and 8 times a year you're going to get to see this big name conductor. He actually lives here and is part of the fundraising, is kind of the face of the orchestra. I think those are very important concepts, and I think too many of the big names don't do that. Yeah.
Something about your orchestra based on your experience, based on what you've done so far. How is it putting a board together? What do you have to consider? What do you have to think about for people who maybe in different parts of the country might want to start their own orchestra or their own organization? What do they have to do, or what you done that has helped you in shaping your organization?
Well, what I started with, I finally just I decided, okay, I'm going to do this, and I looked around and said, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing. I need help. My friend Bob that I mentioned, he's a saxophone player, and he had started a jazz band, a big band, 19-piece swing band, and played weddings and parties and whatever, all that stuff. But it was a nonprofit. He incorporated it. He'd gone through all that stuff. Now he's a lawyer, so I just sat down with him one day. I said, okay, how do you go through all this? And he kind of walked me through the beginning process. Some of it's very simple. Here in Georgia, you get on the Secretary of State's website and incorporate a business. It takes about an hour. Costs about $100. And within a couple of weeks, they mail you the official certificate saying that you're incorporated. You go get a tax ID number from the IRS. I did that on my iPhone in carpool line waiting to pick up my kid. It took about 3 minutes to fill that information out. And they send you an email with your tax ID number, your EIN, your employer identification number. Pretty simple. Recruiting a board is very tricky. I started with just talking to as many people as I possibly could. And almost everybody was, wow, that's a great idea. But I kind of made a mental note, okay, they think it's a great idea, but they weren't asking lots of questions. This person thought it was a great idea and was asking lots of questions. They're a little more invested and they're a little more interested in it. So put them kind of on the short list. I found almost by accident a student of mine, an adult student of mine, who not much of a musician. Her last kids just went off to college. She wanted to learn to play saxophone, so she signed up for lessons. But we started talking about that, and she thought, well, that's a great idea, and so asked her to be on the board. Some of that was finding I needed local people. This first set of board people all have a personal connection to me. They all have a responsibility coming up next winter in February to help us find other people to be on the board. There are only 6 of us right now. We hope the state of Georgia limits us to 15. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that varies from state to state, but I'd like to get it to at least double digits because you're looking for connections in your community, and connections not just for money. I tell the board members, I don't expect you to sit down and write me a check for $50,000, but you have connections in this community. For instance, one of my board members, a lawyer named Jerry Landers. He's been a lawyer here in Marietta for 30 years. He knows everybody. Yeah. So immediately we sat down and we said, okay, let's talk about some law firms. Okay, well, you also work with that business and this business, and so you're going to provide an introduction to them, and I'll go talk to them about the orchestra and see if we can sign them on to be a sponsor or donate money or advertise in the program or all of the above. Finding those people that can kind of get you into the medical community or the legal community. We're right there on the square in Marietta, so I've got somebody who owns a business on the square in Marietta. She's in that business association, about 30 local businesses, and we are slowly but surely going around to every single one of them saying, look, we're a local business too. We think we can help you, and you can help us. Let's talk about some things we can do with this. And I've got several businesses there, a couple of restaurants they're talking about let's we'll be title sponsor for a concert, or we'll donate money, or you want to bring your musicians here after rehearsal but before the concert, they can come in and we'll give them a discount, that sort of thing. Most people, if you couch it in terms of this is part of our community, are usually wanting to be very helpful and can help as much as they can. But recruiting a board, that's one of the really tricky things. You got to get everybody to buy into your vision. And so you got to have a very, very clear vision of what this group is going to do. Yeah. Being able, part of talking to as many people as I possibly could about it, it allowed me to kind of focus and craft a statement, almost like an elevator speech. The concept of you get on the elevator and somebody says, "Hey, what do you do?" Yeah. And you need to be able to tell them before they get to the next floor. Yeah. Being able to do that was so important in talking to people about the board, talking to people about getting them to think about would they be interested in sponsoring and donating, all of that stuff. It's just, you got to have a very, very finely crafted message to all of them so that they know exactly what they're getting into. If there's any ambiguity, they're going to say, "Wait a minute, I'm not real sure about this."
Yeah.
You got to make sure they're sure. Either way, because there are several people I asked to be on the board that said, "Yeah, I don't have time, or I'm just not interested, or I'm doing this," and and that's fine. You're going to get a lot of rejection. That comes with the territory, unfortunately.
Yeah. How is your orchestra unique? There are professional orchestras, you said, and there's also Atlanta Symphony. And people might say, if we're listening to a professional orchestra and we really want to listen to a professional orchestra, there are a couple around the area, and one of them is Atlanta Symphony, one of the great orchestras in the country. How's your organization different than any of the ones in the area?
Well, several things. First, in my experiences with what I've done with Chamber Cartel, with the Atlanta Concert Band, the Community Band, I really think we have had the most success in the way we present music, which is very different from the way traditional symphony orchestras present music. So we are a little different in the way we present the same classical music. Mm-hmm. For starters, we're in a much smaller venue. Right now, we're in the Theater and Square, which is a 225-seat venue. So it's very intimate. Mm-hmm. You sit in the front row, you're 5 feet away from the violins. If you're sitting in the back row, you're not much further away from the conductor than the back row of the orchestra is. Mm-hmm. It's a very intimate little space. Stage is not very big, so it's really more of a chamber orchestra right now. Mm-hmm. We don't dress as formally. We don't wear tuxedos, which I got overwhelmingly, "Oh, wow, that's great. I don't feel like I have to dress up to go hear the symphony." Yeah. The symphony has an etiquette and some unwritten rules about how you are expected to behave. And some of those rules are different depending on what part of the country you're in, what part of the world you're in. Some of those rules are 100 years old. Some of them are 300 or 400 years old. And if you're new to classical music, you don't know those rules. And that can be very off-putting for some people. So we talked in that first concert about, if you want to applaud between movements, please do. That's one of those it's maybe a little over 100, 120, 130 years old. Mm-hmm. It's not really an expectation that's cemented in stone. We played Beethoven's Third Symphony. When Beethoven's Third Symphony was premiered, people applauded in between movements. And it wasn't uncommon at that time for people to applaud so long and so loud after a movement that they had to play the movement again. And that would just be scandalous today. But that's how Beethoven viewed it. Yeah. So I want to go back to more, this is not formal, elitist, almost snobbery type music. This is music for everybody. And if you want to come in if you don't want to wear a suit and tie, don't wear a suit and tie. Yeah. We wore suit and ties for our concert. Having that intimate venue there, having conversations with the audience. One of the skills I've developed in my almost 10 years with the Atlanta Concert Band is the ability in between each piece to turn around and talk to the audience for 30, 45 seconds, introduce the piece, tell them a little bit something about it, something for them to listen to, something to engage them in before we play the piece of music so they understand what it is they're doing. Yeah. One of my board members, lifelong Atlanta resident, she went to the Atlanta Symphony a couple years ago, and it was the first time she'd been since she was a little kid, and she said she hated it. And she hated it for two reasons. One, nobody on stage ever said anything to the audience. Yeah. They never turned around and, "Thank you for being here. We're glad you're here. Here's what we play."
That's right. Yeah.
It was the typical orchestra concert. She also read the program notes. And this woman has an MBA from Harvard. And she read the program notes and she said she felt dumb afterwards because it was written by somebody with a doctorate in music. And it was kind of written on that level.
Yeah.
And she's not a musician.
Yeah.
Very intelligent woman. You don't get an MBA from Harvard unless you're pretty smart.
Yeah.
So one of the things I do is I'll introduce the piece. We started this past program with Coriolan. So I told them in 30 seconds or less, I told them the story of Coriolan, which is in that entire overture. You hear him banging on the gates of Rome. You hear his mother pleading with him not to invade Rome, and you hear him commit suicide at the very end of the story. Yeah. And so I explained that story to the audience. It took 30 seconds, and then we played it. And everybody afterwards, I stood in the lobby afterwards, everybody afterwards thought, that makes so much more sense. I've heard that piece 100 times. I didn't know the story.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden now there's a connection with classical music, and they all have something like that, especially if it's an overture. The overtures usually tell the story. That's true in movie music. Go listen to the closing credits of any Star Wars movie, and you can follow the character's introduction and the basic storyline in what John Williams has written.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he didn't come up with that idea. That came from opera. That came from Beethoven writing overtures for plays, all sorts of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the audiences aren't presented that. Oh, this is Beethoven. You're supposed to love it. Well, no, we have to do better than that.
Yeah.
I think if that's all we're doing, that's, I think, one of the reasons the perception is that audiences are staying away. They don't understand what it is they're listening to.
Especially in the 21st century, there's so many things happening in the world. People have so many things that come to them from different sides, and all kinds of different types of music, and everything happening. People don't have as strong of a connection with what the orchestral music is. So when they do come to us for the experience, they should also be given something verbally, connection to what is happening, so they have a better understanding. And that's I love that. And it's unfortunate that professional orchestras, they talk about it's all about the music. So you come in, you experience the music, you shouldn't be told anything. Well, that was probably true 150 years ago, but that experience is no longer in the 21st century society that we live in. So it's great that you're doing that. I love that. I was gonna ask, since you work with Chamber Cartel, and I had Caleb on the program a couple of months ago, I think, is your orchestra gonna be doing anything with new music, or is that something that you're saving maybe for years down the road?
Oh no, we're jumping right in. With Chamber Cartel, the last 2 years, we participated in a festival here, a music festival here in Atlanta called Sound Now. There are several different contemporary music groups here in Atlanta that just kind of do their thing most of the year. But in the middle of April, for 1 week, there's a concert every single night of the week, and they all cross-promote. They all go to each other's concerts. They guest play on each other's programs, all of that. We are going to be a part of that. We're going to be the Saturday night concert for the end of that week. With that, I have a viola concerto being written for it, and a local composer named Stephen Wood, who just completed a piece called the Cumberland Symphony, about the Cumberland Wilderness area. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to do 2 brand new world premieres. I've always said to everybody that I speak to about this orchestra is that if all we're doing is playing Beethoven, we're not going to be around very long.
Yeah.
That this is not this is not a museum. An orchestra cannot be a museum. Even the museums you see that are thriving have, they have the classics, but they also have new stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to play new music. And if you come to a concert and you hear, Beethoven's Third Symphony, but you also hear this brand new viola concerto, it's okay if you don't like one of those. And some people may say, well, I didn't like the Beethoven. Well, okay, Beethoven, not necessarily for everybody. I think that would be very odd, me personally, but some people say may not like Beethoven. I would really like the viola concerto because it's brand new.
Yeah.
There is a certain, I'm not sure what the word is. There's a certain energy there that this is brand new.
Yeah.
With Chamber Cartel, I've gotten to do a lot of world premieres, and that there's something really special about that.
Yeah.
So we're going to make sure the audience knows, hey, there's something really special about this. Nobody in the world's ever heard this piece of music before. And you know what? They may never hear it again. We may get through it and go, yeah, that wasn't very good.
Yeah.
Okay. But that happens. That's, you go to a rock concert and you hear 30 pieces. You don't like all 30 of them.
Yeah.
You may like 25 of them. Hopefully you like most of them. But it should be the same thing with an orchestra. You're going to get introduced to new music, and you're going to like some of it, and you're not going to like some of it, and some of it's going to be in between, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And as long as we're not, everything we're playing you hate. If everything we're playing you hate, then we're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But you should be part of this process that's been going on for centuries of vetting the music. There's a reason we still play Beethoven symphonies, because through the decades and the centuries since then, people have played it and liked it and said, we should play it again. I like that recording. I want to hear more of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Or what's the Wellington Symphony, the piece Beethoven wrote? It sounds like a bad middle school band medley.
Yeah.
It's just awful, and nobody ever plays it anymore.
Yeah.
Because people heard it and thought, I don't want to hear that piece again. It's part of the vetting process.
Yeah.
We are still part of this living, breathing art form.
Yeah.
We are going to be a part of that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because classical musicians, sometimes when it comes to these iconic composers, they have such a I don't know what the word is. It's almost godly like connection with that composer that they are afraid to say that that composer might have written something that was not good. And those people are human, and it happens. It's
Yeah.
you could have some bad pieces, and I'm very happy you said that, because it's rare sometimes you find classical musicians that say that or feel that way, because they just want to find something good in everything that composer has done, and that's a good attitude to have, but that's not always necessarily true. Why did you want to be a conductor, and why how it led you to where you are now? What was the path like?
Well, I'm very unusual. I can trace this path back to, I don't remember the exact date, but the fall of 1977. I was 4 years old. I had seen Star Wars in a movie theater 4 or 5 times by that point. And my parents took me to the Family Pops concert for the Columbus Symphony Orchestra in Columbus, Georgia, and they played Star Wars. That was the very first orchestra piece I ever heard live, was the main theme of Star Wars. And immediately I was hooked. And it was a typical Family Pops concert. Conductor's guy is named Harry Kruger. He went around, and this is the violin, and this is the flute, this is trumpet, whatever. He introduced all the instruments, but he also said, and now this is what I do. This is how you conduct. And I remember my dad getting me to stand up and wave my arms just like Harry Kruger was waving his arms. I jokingly called that my first conducting lesson. When I was 5, as soon as I could sit on the bench and reach the keys and take lessons, my parents had me in piano lessons. I was never any good at piano, but immediately went on to other instruments. But I got in the band, and I really liked sitting and playing in the band. I was a drum major at high school marching band. I really liked that. That was really my first taste of it. I describe conducting as the best seat in the house, even though it's not technically a seat. But the difference between sitting in the audience and sitting in an ensemble is huge, just in your investment of your energy and your focus. But going from sitting in an ensemble to being on the podium, I think, is an even greater leap. You're focused on everything. You're doing all of that. You're so into it all. And for me personally, it raises the experience to unbelievable levels, especially when you're working with such great musicians, playing great music. When you've got all of that put together, it's just absolutely amazing. It's almost like an addiction. I go sit and my principal instrument is flute. I go sit and I play in a flute choir or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that was nice. That was fun. But then I get in front of Marietta Symphony Orchestra, and it's like, wow, that's it. That's what I want to do. I've always been like that.
Yeah. A life-changing moment. What was the life-changing moment, whether it's personal or professional?
Life-changing moment. My goodness. There's the usual ones, the marriage and the birth of your kids and all that, all those things. Those are kind of cliche, but although they're certainly true. That's a good question. I think the first time, sorry, kids in the background.
It's all good. It's great. That's part of it.
It is part of it. Goodness. Life-changing moment. I'm trying to think of a professional moment. I remember my very first time. I graduated from Florida State University and took over a band job in the middle of the year, and after knowing them for only 7 weeks, I had to take them to District Concert Festival to go get scores in front of judges, and I picked a pretty easy program because I was 23 years old and about as wet behind the ears as you could get, and they did great. I mean, they got straight ones, and the audience loved it, and the judges loved it, and the whole time I was thinking, hey, I could do this. I think this is going to work out.
Yeah.
That moment, going through college and you get learn all that stuff, but then you get through with it, and the professor say something really profound. Said, here's your diploma. This is your license. Go learn, because you are going to find out in that first week of class that you really don't know very much.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Put yourself in front of musicians, and if they don't know how to do it, and you don't know how to tell them how to figure it out, they're not going to do it. They're counting on you. So that motivated you. That was one of those moments that you said, okay, I can do this. It was really, really good moment.
What's next for you? Whether it's with Marietta Symphony or any other project, what's coming up next for you?
Next is the usual December for most musicians. at Oglethorpe we do a Boar's Head concert. It's an English college tradition, but we've turned it into, we add music to it and go caroling and do all sorts of fun things like that. And in that community band, we have our big holiday pops concert with the local church choir and handbells and organ, and it's just, we have a good time. The audience sing alongs. It's a lot of really good stuff. So that and my church work keeps me pretty busy. I'm playing all the way up until midnight on Christmas Eve, and then I hope I'm going to get the next week off. So yeah, busy up until Christmas Day, and then beginning of January, right back at it. I got a concert in February with Marietta, concert in March with the Atlanta Concert Band, concert in April with Marietta, concert and then my summer is crazy with the community band between Memorial Day and Labor Day. We do 4 different concerts. Yeah. 4th of July and Memorial Day, and we do an August Pops concert and all that fun stuff. So yeah, it keeps me pretty busy.
Paul, I'm sure we could talk for hours about all kinds of conducting stuff, and I really appreciate you always supporting this program, always commenting online, and it's great to see that. Anything we missed? Anything you want to talk about that we didn't get to so far?
Well, I can think of a million things we could talk about. Like you mentioned, we could sit here and talk for hours. I think if I had to do it all over again, I think I would have. I'd go back to that 23-year-old and say, look, this is what you want to do. Start asking around and figure out how to do it, and do it sooner. Yeah. Nobody's going to give it to you. You got to go out and get it. Yeah. And the people that can tell you how to do it are out there. And I very rarely encounter people that aren't willing to give of themselves and help. Yeah. Even if it's just advice. Call up that total stranger that you saw, conduct a concert, introduce yourself and say, hey, that's kind of what I want to do. Can I come pick your brain about it? Yeah. I've never really run into anybody that's just downright rude about it. Yeah. No, go away. I don't know you. Just, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee and talk. Sure, no problem. Yeah. And that has been so important for me, especially the last few years, as I've kind of gotten this stuff ramped up, to be able to say to people, okay, I don't know how to do this, but you do. You've done it. So what do I need to know? And people, most of the time, have been just overwhelmed with, yeah, absolutely, please. Here's what I learned. Here's the mistakes I made. Don't do that. Do this. Talk to this person. Go there. All that stuff. It's just, I wish I could go back to myself and 25 years ago and say, do this. Do it now. Don't wait.
That's great advice, and that's something that every young musician, I have to remind myself that every time, because sometimes it could be overwhelming to just talk to random people. But I've been good about this over the years in contacting people, whether even if it's not about asking them a question or learning from them. It's just sometimes after post concert, if I've attended a concert I really enjoyed, I always end up writing to that ensemble or those people, the soloists, and saying, hey, that was a great concert. I really enjoyed what you did here and there. And I didn't do that, and I wish I did more of that too. But now I'm a little bit better about that. And I don't know how many emails or messages some of these people get, probably not many, but it's always great to make sure you tell those people that they did well, or just like you said, ask them questions about how they've made their career. And that's something that classical musicians especially could be a little bit timid and shy about. I don't know if it's something in the educational system, maybe something in the way we teach music, or the way we approach it on the college level and the classes that we have. I'm not sure, but there should be something that reinforces and tells students that going out and talking to people is not really a bad idea. And the worst thing that could happen is someone could say, I want to answer your question, which, as you said, never really happens.
Yeah, I think we put people on a pedestal, and they're this magical, mystical person who just appeared at 60 years old and with lots of success, and nobody gets to that point without lots of education, lots of training, lots of experience, and lots of mistakes and failures. Everybody who is succeeding at some point learned from a failure. Mm-hmm. And so, we tend to kind of put those big name conductors, we tend to kind of put them on a pedestal, but look at them when they were 19 years old. they were not any different from you in the most respects, and they've done stupid things and gotten fired from jobs, and it happens. And so being able to reach out to people like that and say, what'd you learn from that? What tell me something stupid that I shouldn't do, that kind of thing. Musicians, as a general rule, love helping each other. That's been my experience. So, I think that's one of the great things about our business. Here in Atlanta, we have a great music community where we all go. It's the hang. After the concert, you're going to go hang with a group of people, and you're going to meet new people and have new Facebook friends and new Twitter friends and whatever. There's a jazz musician here in town named Joe Granston who has a Monday night jazz gig at Cafe 290 every other Monday. But the bar is full of a who's who of musicians in Metro Atlanta.
Yeah.
And so you walk in and you just start meeting people. Oh, I know that guy, but I don't know the person next to him. So there's somebody else to meet. And you have conversations over a beer, listen to some great music, and now you've got your network's a little bit bigger. Maybe you've learned a few things, and the community is stronger for it.
One thing that was, as you've said, your frustrations with applying to jobs. One thing that I saw that Canada did, and I don't know if you saw my post, I think you did online, where, Canadian orchestras, for the most part, have young Canadian conductors that get opportunities to conduct in the and that's the case for around the world. But in the U.S., and of course it's about the country and the what the country represents to the world and what the country means to the rest of the world. The U.S. we accept everyone that comes in and takes assistant conductor jobs. But from what I've seen, it seems like the conductors, the young conductors in the U.S. have suffered a little bit from this, and it seems like on the international level there aren't too many American conductors. So how do you feel about that?
I think there's a bias against American conductors in America. Uh-huh. I see Americans being a little bit more successful in Europe than they are here. Now that New York is not an American either, there aren't really any of the big major orchestras in America that have American conductors there.
Yeah.
I know that, and I don't know the actual stats, but almost all of the assistant positions that I've applied to through the last 8-10 years or whatever, the majority of them are going to non-Americans.
Yeah.
But I don't see the Americans that do get those jobs. I don't see them working their way up yet into bigger jobs.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what the solution is. I don't think it should be a law that you got to hire a certain percentage of Americans or whatever. I don't think that's right. I think the Americans should earn their place, but I do think there is kind of a bias against Americans.
Yeah.
The more I've conducted, the more people have said, "Oh, you're very talented, and you should do this and do that and do the other." And I just kind of think, okay, but a lot of those assistant positions, I'm 44 years old. I'm way too old to apply for most assistant positions, which is again one of my motivations for starting an orchestra here in Marietta. Is okay, I've got to do it myself because nobody else is going to give me an opportunity.
San Francisco Symphony has Michael Tilson Thomas, longtime conductor. He's leaving, so yeah. We'll see what happens with that orchestra as well. But I love I'm Armenian, and my background, I was born in Armenia, and I'm not saying this for any reason. I'm not even saying this is an American. It's just it would be great to have a little bit more opportunities for some of these young conductors who don't often have the opportunities to work with professional orchestras. And as you mentioned, you've had similar problems. What's the scene like for modern music other than Chamber Cartel in Atlanta area? Because that's the only group that I know of, but I've never lived there. I've visited a couple of times, so I don't know much about the scene.
Yeah, there are several groups here in town. It's a group called Bent Frequency, very similar to Chamber Cartel. A lot of the Georgia State University music professors are involved in that kind of group that they put together. They also have a very fine college group called Neophonia. Mm-hmm. That's run by the same guy, Nick Demas, Dr. Demas, who's one of the composition professors there at Georgia State University. There are a few other groups that occasionally do things. The Atlanta Symphony has been very good about championing new music. Robert Spano's done a very good job of making sure that, yes, we're going to play Beethoven, Mozart, and Mahler and all that stuff, but there's going to be a very good sampling of brand new music. They've commissioned quite a bit, so much so that there's an Atlanta school of composers. I've always thought that was kind of an odd name, but he's done a good job with that. So the audiences here, I think, are maybe a little more receptive. I know they're more receptive than they used to be to new music. I can't really compare them to, say, audiences in New York or Chicago or LA or whatever, but the Atlanta Symphony audiences, I think, are a lot more receptive than they used to be to it. And that goes back to, I'm kind of modeling what I want to do with Marietta on that, is that, we need to play new music as often as we can.
Yeah.
I would have played some newer music on that first concert if the music hadn't been so expensive.
Yeah.
Renting music can be ridiculous. So,
Yeah.
I gotta get better at fundraising so we can do more of that stuff. But I'm working on that.
It's great that there are a lot of conductors out there who, especially on the professional scene, that present new music. But again, it comes down to the presentation of that. Not just performing the piece, but as you said before, actually explaining a little bit about the piece. Because I always remember the thing that happened to me at Cal State Northridge, where we played a lot of pieces by modern. This is when I was doing my master's. We played new music by young composers, and there were people that a couple of my friends who were there afterwards. They came to me and they're like, "Oh, what was happening with the violin? Why were they just tapping on the violin and they were using their bow in a weird way? What was going on? They didn't know what was happening." And I remember that experience. I was 25, and afterwards I was like, I must from now on talk to the audience and give them some insight, because a lot of these the audience members are sometimes have not been to these concerts, or have been but have never been told about what's going on. So I made it a point that from then on I would talk to the audience and give them some insight into the piece. And again, it doesn't have to be academic or doctoral and everything, but it should be a little bit more informative, and tell them maybe some stories behind what's happening, so they have a better idea. So when they leave the experience, they've learned something, they've experienced something, and hopefully enjoyed their experience, so they could come back. But if you don't tell them these stories or the ideas behind it, then they just leave and they maybe don't ever want to come back to those concerts. So hopefully that ties in with some of these professional orchestras, because it is great that they're performing new music, but I think it should be presented with a little bit more of a story.
Yeah, there needs to be you can't just lay it out there and say, this is great, you should love it, and then they're confused because they don't know what's going on, and that kind of leaves a bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah.
I experience that every now and then with some of the contemporary music that I hear in town. I didn't understand what was going on there, but they said, "This is such a great piece of music." And I'm thinking, okay, I don't understand, so maybe help me out, explain it here. The audience, you should never assume that your audience knows what's going on. You should always make sure you introduce things properly. And like you said, it can't be a doctoral dissertation, but you should never talk down to them. There's a fine line there between
That's true.
using terms they don't understand and talking to them like they're 5 years old. You need to make sure you give us the tools to listen, and then say, "Well, what'd you think?"
Yeah.
Okay, I like it. Want to hear it again, or don't like it? Don't want to hear it again. Whatever that needs to be.
And the crazy thing is even if you have doctorate, musical PhD musicologists sitting in the audience, I'm sure with your stories they could even learn something or remember something they had learned before, because these great doctoral people who have doctorates and PhDs and whatever, all of them don't know every single thing about music. So there might be a composer that they don't even know about. So it'll be a great experience for them. And even if they do know, it'll be kind of a memory, remembering what they've learned. So it's a win-win. You're not going to upset anyone by repeating something that they had learned 20 years ago or 10 years ago or even a couple of years ago. So just always for conductors, for music presenters, it's always good to present it and always talk about it, welcome the audience, as you've mentioned. That's a big thing, just to make sure that the people that come to your concerts know that you appreciate that they're there to support you. So I really hope to see that more of that in concerts. Unfortunately, again, we don't see much of it. Thank you so much, Paul. We'll hopefully have you back on at some point, maybe next year after you've done a season or so with the your new orchestra, and we could have you back and talk about some of the problems and positives and negatives of what has happened with starting your own orchestra, and maybe some new advice to young musicians who are starting their own ensembles, and maybe things to avoid and things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be fun.
Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in person someday.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get together someday. That'd be great.
Have a beautiful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.